Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology, how it can predict events in the world, how it can be used to assess your life over the coming week, and also how it can affect events over the coming months. So I'm going to have a brief discussion. You may notice my hair is distinctly more under control this week. I finally managed to get my hair cut, which I have every few months, and so it feels like a great weight has been lifted from my head. I actually, in case you can't tell, I grew up in a time when long hair was pretty prevalent, um, and even in those times, I tended to go from like really long hair to really short hair. So I was never really married to that particular tradition. But basically, it's makes me a little lighter. For those of you who have really high definition screens, you might be able to see a scratch on my nose. That's not the result of a fight. It's a result of a fight to get a cat to take some medicine. So, so essentially, yeah, everything else is pretty solid. I think one of the things that I'd like to start off with is this coming week, especially the next few days, is considered to be a really good time to start things. Okay. And one reason for that yesterday was the absolute yesterday, and really today was actually considered to be the absolute best day to start projects. Okay, and I'm going to share the chart with you and show you why. Okay. By the way, if you would like lessons with me, I provide a variety of astrological instruction. I can also do post-diagnosis instruction. I can also do Reiki training. I can do a variety of I teach tarot as well, and I do a lot of readings. Okay, from basically I would say all over the world, and I've been doing this for about 30 years. Actually, a bit more, about 30, close to 35 years now, and so if you'd like to contact me, or if you'd even like to be on the show as an astrologer, please let me know, and I'll be happy to invite you on. If you want to talk about, it's an open invitation for people to contact me to talk about what they would like to talk about in astrology. So I'm doubling back into some topics which I had left alone for the past few months, like Nadi astrology and Brigu Padati. And so these are all Anjamini astrology, which is a pet passion of mine. And these are all offshoots of the greater Vedic astrology tradition, or they're all integral parts of it. So essentially, if you'd like instruction, as I said, or if you'd like a reading, the best way to contact me is to text me at 508-525-0001, or excuse me, to email me at garygomesg@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook, but I wouldn't recommend using Messenger from Facebook because I often don't check those messages as much as I should. I check my texts, and I'm also on WhatsApp. So I check those messages and my email much more frequently. So if you're interested in contacting me, that's the absolute easiest way to contact me. You can send me messages on Messenger, but I have unfortunately missed some of those messages over time. So I'm just telling you the best way to contact me versus the worst way to contact me. And so, like I said, 508-525-0001. 508-525-0001. All right, so it sounds like a jingle number. Okay, so all right, enough of the silliness. Let's look at the chart and look and grow wise as to why this is a good time. Okay. So I'm not screen sharing yet. So let me get out of here. Sometimes this takes a couple of tries. For me to get access, my apologies. And inadvertently, I closed down the program while I was doing this. So it'll take a little longer to get this back up again. Okay, thanks for your patience. I do have some interviews, which I have yet to edit with Al and Anand. I'm going to be covering Gary O'Toole's book, who's a very good astrologer from Ireland. And he actually put out a massive book on dashas or times, and it's very good. I think it's extremely good. Let's see now. And I am currently in the process of taking stabs at getting my book together, which, as you know, has been a process long in the making. So, but it'll be worth it when it gets here. Okay. Because I'm going to show you some real secrets that a lot of other astrologers don't show you or don't use all that often. And I personally find them very valuable. Okay. All right, so let's try this one more time. We're gonna stop the share, and we're gonna go to the share again. Okay, so this should show up, but again, we're gonna do the rule of three, which is what I was taught in Vedic astrology years ago, and we'll do it 3 times for good luck. And so the chart should be showing on the screen right now. Sorry for the delay. So one thing I will point out to you is that we have, so this is actually a pretty nice combination. Okay. So just in general terms, the sun is in its sign of exaltation. It's not at its maximum degree of exaltation, but it's in its sign of exaltation. So pretty much anything you do will be done in a fairly disciplined way because Saturn's aspecting the sun. Okay, so it may take a little time to get going, but you do have the support of the universe behind you. The other thing that's worthy about this combination is that Jupiter is over here in Taurus, and it's between Jupiter is between the sun and the moon. Okay, so this is moon is in a Ardra nakshatra, which is kind of a difficult nakshatra. It's a stormy nakshatra, and kind of an emotional one. So you may find people a little bit, feelings hurt a little bit more easily over the next few days. Mars is aspecting moon. And you'll also find people a little bit more aggressive over the next few days. This is just in general, just over the next couple of days, between now and Monday, roughly. On Monday, the moon enters Cancer, which is its own sign. Yesterday, the moon was in Taurus, which is a sign of exaltation. Okay, so that's really an excellent time to start projects. So we're just like one day late. But it's between, the moon is between really good placements. It's between, so it was in its absolute best position about uh, roughly around Friday. Uh, so it was at its maximum degree of exaltation range, on Friday. But the other thing that happens here is we have the sun surrounded by benefics. Okay, so this is what's called a Shubha Katari Yoga. So Katari means scissors, and Shubha means beneficial. Okay, basically that's my rough translation of it. And so it's a good combination, especially for learning, especially for giving advice, especially for luck. Okay, and this is especially true in fixed assets, and also true in terms of justice, although Saturn will delay or kind of pervert those gains or delay those gains just a little bit because it's aspecting one of the planets of prosperity, Venus. But Venus is with Mercury. That'll make communications with people a little bit better. They won't be fully, it won't be fully good for about another month or so. So within about 10 days, Venus enters Taurus, which is its own sign. The sun will also be in the same sign with Jupiter. Again, the sun and Jupiter, which as I discussed last week, are relatively close together. A lot of astrologers get really worried about combustion. But one interesting thing right now is that Mercury, which is normally in combustion with the sun, is not, at least for a few days. Okay, really for about, I'd say, a couple of weeks, because the sun's going to be moving in that particular sign. So this is a really good time for making reasoned, intelligent judgments and for having good discussions with people. Again, the only downside to this is Saturn's in Aquarius, so people will rather stubbornly stick to their opinions no matter what. But you'll also see a lot of new ideas being forwarded in the mix. So I think it's kind of fascinating that we're seeing a lot of activity happening right now, especially connected with things like economics, where there's actually some reconsideration of how to combat inflation, how to combat, not from the administration, but from the scholarly community, how to combat inflation, how to combat, because inflation is essentially a function of, so everybody's stuck in kind of an inflationary environment right now. So we're seeing gasoline prices increase again. That's the Saturn. That's in part the Mars-Rahu combination. So it can be caused by a variety of different things. But Rahu can cause panic. This is over mineral or underground sources. But just before I go off into that particular tangent, let me just say, excellent time to get things moving over the next couple of days, all the way really until the end of next week. And then Moon hits K2 around the end of next week, and that'll make people a little bit depressed or a little bit hypercritical of any activities. And also there's a danger of theft, especially of property towards the end of next week. So those are the kinds of things you have to watch out for over the next few weeks. But actually, one of the things I can be optimistic about is that slowly but surely, as Jupiter enters Taurus, unobstructed by Saturn, there's less perversion of, or there's less tinkering with the law. There's more openness about the law. There's more openness about freedom and security and what those mean to people. And you'll see a lot of countries around the world focusing more on security and economic stability, and how to conserve money, how to conserve um, finances, how to balance budgets. This will go on over the next year or so. And this will also have an impact um, on economic policies, which seem to be a little too extreme or a little too trying to think of the right way to put it, so it captures the essence of what a little less careless. Now Mars is, and this may strike some people as being funny because it's Mars. Mars is an aggressive planet, but Mars is also a liberal planet. And what I mean by that is not classical liberal as, let's say, we have in the United States, like the Democratic Party, or like they would have, like they would have in England, which is Labor. Those are actually more Saturnian planets, to be honest, parties, to be honest with you, because essentially their emphasis has mainly historically been on helping the poor or the downtrodden, and lately it's actually taken a step towards what I would call a more controlling function, a more regulatory function. So Jupiter is more connected with parties that are more independent or more philosophically bound, and also more religiously bound, to be honest with you. That's Jupiter's essentially, it's connected to wisdom, or conventional wisdom, or to orthodoxy. So that would tend to be more, Jupiter is really the planet of right-wing parties, or not necessarily dictatorship. Saturn tends to rule those things. But Mars is a liberal planet. So what this means is we'll see a lot of panic over liberal policies around the world because of the Mars-Rahu conjunction. This will crest in around, I would say, around a month or so, maybe a little bit earlier, because of Mars and Rahu will be in tight conjunction. Okay. And so May will be a really interesting month, especially in terms of this chart. And just by the accident of when I'm doing this particular chart, there'll be a lot of focus on economies, whether or not economies can stabilize. And also, I would say, on higher institutions. So there'll be dissatisfaction with the government, dissatisfaction with higher education, dissatisfaction, and a lot of fights, a lot of physical altercations over philosophy, and essentially, which is doing the right thing. So since Saturn and Jupiter are both in fixed signs, we're not going to see a lot of give and take over the next few months. That makes sense because it's an election year in the United States, but also there have been some interesting developments in places like England, like the UK, which I'm more familiar with than most countries, and that is essentially the Labour Party has an overwhelming majority, but there's a third party which is more nationalistic. So more nationalistic than the Tories, and they almost have the same amount of seats as the Tories do. So the Tories are more like trying to think of a good way to explain it. The Tories are more like what we know as traditional Democrats. They're not really. So if we go to political orientation, uh, the Tory party is really, so if we have the United States party system here, uh, let's say in the middle, the Tories are a little bit to the left of that, or kind of like mainstream Democrats. Labor is more towards where the progressive wing of um, the Democratic Party sits. And when you have, um, and so, and this is true of most of the party systems in Europe, so the conservatives really aren't as conservative or uh, as nationalistic as the American conservative parties are. But it's interesting because there seems to be a swing towards the right in Europe and a swing towards the right in a lot of countries. Now, that's been portrayed as an autocratic shift. And although there are right-wing governments which are autocratic, so let's say Turkey and Erdogan, there are other countries around the world that that's not the case. They still believe in freedom, but they believe in they're getting to the point where they can't handle the influx of immigration. It's not because they hate the people, although I'm sure some of them do. There's always that element, but it's more because they're looking at their own systems, and their own systems can't stand the weight. And also, some of the governments have become essentially more involved. Some of the left-leaning governments have become more involved with personal lives than a lot of people have been comfortable with. Now, again, I'm not advocating for either position. I'm just describing the situation to you. So this Jupiter, to me, indicates a link to the right. It doesn't mean every country will go in that direction. No, of course not. You'll probably see Labor win the next election because they just have an overwhelming majority of seats. They have more than the Tories and this right-wing party combined. So it's more than likely Labor will win in the UK. But I think one of the things also is that a lot of governments, despite their political philosophies, will look at their resources and say, well, can we do what we want to do? And I think over the next few years, you'll see a general tightening of resources. Not that I'm in favor of that. I'm just saying that that's actually one of the hallmarks. So we have these large spending cycles we go through, and then we have these large austerity cycles we go through. Now, the thing of it is, the sad part of it is that won't curb inflation. You might curb inflation because demand will be cut back, which is one thing that almost always happens. But it won't curb inflation because inflation is determined more by the availability of goods than it is by the release of money into the economy. That's not to say the release of money into the economy doesn't have any effect on it, but basically, so let's say we go back to the Obama years, they were worried that the Fed was flooding too much money into the economy with near zero interest rates. And I can understand that, but if you don't have demand, that money sits dormant. you had a lot of people who were still unemployed, who were not in a position to take out loans, at least early in that cycle. So that quantitative easing, that thing called quantitative easing, really didn't affect inflation because number one, we had more available resources, and number two, we had more people who were out of work and struggling to get to the position where they felt comfortable to borrow again. So economics is not the most interesting topic for a lot of people, but it's extremely important. And like I said, I think one of the things that a lot of European countries in particular, but it's also hitting countries like Japan and China, is that inflationary prices will allow consumption up to a certain point. And people will say, and people are losing their jobs now. I mean, this is one of the interesting things. But so we're creating more part-time jobs. That's basically what's happened in the US economy. So again, as long as people are content at working with 3 full-time jobs, or as long as they stay employed working those 3 full-time jobs, people can tread water. But if the inflation rate passes that ability to sustain yourself, that starts to get problematic. So also one of the things that I wanted to mention was the jury trials that were going on. The Trump hush money trial, there was a lot of emphasis on over the past week with the Stormy Daniels testimony. There was a lot of emphasis on sex, and Venus is in Mars sign, and Mars is in a sign with Rahu, which is connected with scandal. So again, that's why the testimony was so salacious. That was why the testimony was essentially so out there, basically. And it was also interesting because the judge was actually surprised they didn't raise more exceptions, and I think what so essentially everybody misread each other's signals. So the judge was expecting them to make more objections, and if Trump had said there was an affair, they wouldn't have called Stormy Daniels. He said there wasn't a sexual encounter, and so that's why they called her. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as a result of this. But I think the salaciousness actually probably hurt the state's case, although that doesn't mean he won't be convicted. Okay, but that's just my humble opinion. The moon's in the 12th house, so we can expect to see more water damage. Venus has been very strong over the past few months, and we've seen all that flooding in Texas, in Pakistan, I believe, all around the world, pretty much. And this is essentially Venus gaining a lot of strength, So even though it's past its exaltation point, this will affect the weather. Saturn will still give more air catastrophes, unfortunately. So be careful traveling, especially I would say in June, when Mars will be in this sign. Saturn will aspect Mars again. And also, let me just see what else we can predict worldwide. I've already seen signs of an economic downturn, but again, it isn't really being felt quite as strongly as anticipated. But May, June, you're seeing a lot of high-tech companies engaged in major layoffs. That doesn't necessarily affect Main Street, and but it will affect the stock market. And you're also seeing, so there were some things that made bankers happy this week. So the interest rate caps were on credit cards were eliminated, in a ruling. But I think they'll find a way to reinstate those, or some other way to phrase the law. And 1, 2, 3, 4 Mars aspects of the moon. Expect a lot more fighting this month. In terms of Israel and foreign conflicts, still no resolution, not really for, I don't think, really until the fall. And if it continues into the fall, I'm really worried about escalation, but I still don't think we're going to see a world war. I think that's really doom sharing, or that's really just incredibly negative thinking on the part of astrologers. I think one of the things that I would advise people to do, though, is especially in terms of media and government. It's interesting because media actually seems to be getting a little bit more willing to consider different perspectives on things, because more and more reports are coming out indicating that some things that were thought to be untrue years ago are turning out to be true. Like Chris Cuomo came out and tested, and indicated some experiences he had. So I can't say the word, but you can look it up easily enough. And so there does seem to be some doubt on the wisdom of government, at least by some people, at least by some media outlets, and even some mainstream media outlets. I think the media still overall is not trustworthy, to be honest with you. And when I'm talking about media, I'm talking about all aspects of media. I'm talking about YouTube. I'm talking about the smaller streaming service stations. I'm talking about everybody. I think what I'm seeing is a lot of interpretation as opposed to reporting. So I think, and that bothers me just from a personal perspective, because again, I think they think audiences are too dumb to understand what's going on. And I'm not saying that some interpretation isn't necessary. I think some of these issues are very complicated issues, and some interpretation certainly is necessary. But I think the degree of interpretation is getting ridiculous. So it's really tough to draw a line, especially when you go to certain channels, as to where news, actual reporting of facts, which is how I interpret news, and interpretation. So interpretation has taken the place of reporting. So you're not going to get somebody saying this happened today, this happened today. You're going to get an interpretation of what this means. And I think that's a bad trend. I've always thought that was a bad trend in journalism. And so years ago, I can remember newscasts, and you see, so this is how old I am. You see Eric Sevareid give an opinion piece at the end of a newscast, or you see an editorial opinion expressed uh, by a reporter, saying what he, say, or a commentator saying what he or she thought about it. Now it's like, so the ratio was like maybe 90% news, 10% commentary. Now it's flipped where I think it's like 95% commentary and 5% news. So that's why I don't trust them. Okay. And again, it's part of the sensational nature of news reporting. This is a business. This is not, it's a business and a public service, but it's more of a business than anything else. And if you get bad reports on businesses, then you lose commercial revenue. So rarely will you see something criticizing a pharmaceutical company on TV because pharmaceutical companies are big sponsors. So that's nothing against pharmaceutical companies. They serve a very valuable purpose, but I think certain folks get away with more than they should, just basically. All right, so that's my end of my editorial. The other thing is, just one other thing, this Saturn-Sun conjunction, Sun with Jupiter will actually help negotiations, foreign negotiations, a bit more after mid-May. But with Venus there, whether or not they'll be just or not, I don't know. But like I said, we also have Saturn aspect in the Sun, which is stopping President Biden from issuing aid to Israel, which was already voted by Congress. That was so I'm not necessarily saying I'm in favor of what Israel is doing, but this was already a law passed by Congress. And so depending on your perspective, he's either violating the intent of Congress or he's trying to form a more just peace in the Middle East. So, but again, there are certain political reasons he's doing it, which are fairly obvious. So again, I'm not necessarily criticizing him. I just both other major, I won't call RFK. I don't think RFK is really has a serious chance of winning, but RFK is in favor of aid to Israel, so is Trump. So it's not necessarily that you're going to get a different perspective if either of those guys goes into office. And they may even hold back and try to get more concessions before they send aid. But it is a precarious situation. I would not want to be president right now. It's just, number one, I don't have the temperament for it, but number two, it's just a mess. So never fear, within about a year, a lot of this stuff will be cleared out. And I think we'll be back towards trying to rebuild the economy in a more sane way, towards trying to build peace negotiations in a more sane way. I think the problem we run into right now is that everybody has an opinion, and depending on your party, you're trying to placate the loudest voices or the most active voices within your party. And I think that it's tough, but it never works out quite the way you want it to. Okay, so that's just, so you end up leaning too much in one direction, and while it balance risks everybody getting pissed off at you. A balanced approach is often the best approach. That's just my personal belief. All right, so enough of the editorializing. Let's look at what the actual stars are going to do to you or for you over the next week or so. So we have Sun, Mercury, Venus in Aries in the first house. That's a really good position. It means good relationships with people, fulfillment of desires for people with Aries or planets in Aries. And Saturn's aspecting that combination. It'll take a while, but the actual delivery of services or goods will be very solid. So that's one thing that's optimistic about that. Also, some money coming into Aries because of Jupiter being in the second house. Moon is in the third house, so some change in desires or some change in ambitions. And finally, when we go to the fourth house, the moon is Lord of the fourth house, so some desires for stability at home. K2's in the sixth. So again, some domestic disruption in the house or some illnesses. Saturn's in the 11th, slow gain of income. Mars, tendency to overspend. For Taurus, this is May 15th to June 15th, so we're about to enter Taurus this week. The sun's about to enter Taurus this week in Indian astrology. For people with this particular rising sign, Jupiter's in the first house. Mercury's with Sun and Venus in the 12th house, so there'll be a lot of communication, a lot of with people from far away, a lot of expression, especially in terms of writing or speaking. K2's in the fifth house. There'll be some misunderstandings about what you've done in the past, some misunderstandings with kids. This will continue for months. This isn't really a new thing. Saturn's in the 10th house. It indicates the sign will be working a lot and it will gain new friends, but the friends will be a little bit erratic or a little bit unconventional. And again, the sign will spend just a little bit too much money. So there'll be a lot of focus on events far away for this sign. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Don't know what happened to my captions. My captions seem to be fading in out. All right. All right. All right. So I'm going to make the captions a little bigger. Okay. And for this sign, definitely some fame because the Gati Lagna is in the fourth house. So I don't often mention this, and the Hora Lagna is in the seventh house. So there'll be some gain of income through relationship partners. So this actually looks like a fairly good week for Taurus, but again, watch out for overspending, watch out for giving too much attention to places far away. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So these people in distant places will help you, and they'll be very, very nice people, but you can't waste a little bit of time with them. The other thing is, let's go to Gemini. Gemini has its Lord Mercury is finally out of the 10th house where it was debilitated. So that gave people with this sign problems with their legs or problems with their knees. And oftentimes what happens is it'll give them some problems in career because this sign tends to like to converse with people. This sign tends to like to be the center of attention. It should bring some more money in because the second house Lord is in the first house. Jupiter's in the 12th. So career, you'll spend money, but you'll also gain some recognition overseas or in other parts of the world. And relationship life, you'll spend a little bit of time away from your relationship partner, but you may gain admirers from different places. The Gati Lagna is in the third house, so there's a strong desire for fame. Ketu is in the fourth house. Not a bad placement, essentially just a little bit detached from home. Mars is in the 10th house, Saturn is in the 9th house, so slow progress in career, but definitely more activity in career this month. And there will be some extra earnings, so that shows up in two places. Just be careful not to spend too much money on career or on relationship partners. For Cancer, Cancer has the moon in the 12th house, so that indicates a heavy expenditure pattern. Most signs this month do. And Gati Lagna, there'll be some increased wealth. Gatika Lagna in the second house. Ketu in the third house, a lot of fearlessness for this sign, a lot of desire to move forward, but also some confinement. Saturn is in the 8th house. That's really not a bad placement for research or for getting noticed. Mars is in the 9th house with Rahu. That creates a kind of a Raj Yoga for this sign. So actually that's good for this sign. And it will produce increased career success and increased career recognition. Sun, Venus, Mercury are in the 10th house. Jupiter's in the 11th house. Both good for gains. For Leo, Leo has the Gati Lagna in the first house, so there'll be a lot of attention on leadership. Communications will be a bit garbled because of Ketu in the second house. The Lord of the third house is in the 9th house, so strong fulfillment of desires along with the first Lord and the 12th Lord. So there'll be a strong desire to be known overseas and a strong desire to be recognized. So communications will also be really, really good for this sign. For Mars in the 4th house, some disruption of home life, some uncertainty about home life or possessions with this combination. Saturn's in the 7th. Relationship life will be relatively stable, but a little bit insecure. And relationship partners will be kind of frustrated or maybe even contemplating some separation. So that's something to be aware of for this sign over the next year or so. And Saturn aspects the sun, but the sign's luck is very good. Its potential for gains is very good. Overall, this is a good week for Leo. For Virgo, Virgo has Ketu in the first house, which makes it a little bit more intuitive than normal. It gets unexpected breaks, but also unexpected disappointments. So health issues could be a problem for this particular sign, especially intestinal problems and maybe even problems connected with the legs. But overall, Ketu and Mars is in the 7th house, so that kind of aggravates that situation. It will move into the 8th house within about a month or so, and Mars in the 8th house will give relationship problems for the sign. So that's sort of like happening right now as well. But basically, there can be inheritances next month, or maybe even large turnovers of assets next month for the sign. So maybe it might indicate selling property, but this particular month, it'll be a little bit rough. There'll be some arguments with relationship partners, especially around a week from now, 2 weeks from now. Venus is in the 2nd house, indicates money coming from unexpected sources. Mars is Lord of the 3rd and the 6th, so a lot of drive to improve. And Saturn's in the 6th house, so this sign will achieve a lot by being disciplined and by studying and sticking with tasks. Jupiter's in the 9th house. That's good for luck. It indicates new partnerships, even new notoriety and new fame for this particular sign. For a Libra, Libra has Venus in the seventh house, so that will increase the potential for relationship partners. Again, it's a little bit flawed because Saturn is aspecting Venus, but as Sun's there, so relationship partners will seem kind of bossy or difficult, at least for another week or so. And Mercury, but there'll be improved communication with relationship partners and improved health with relationship partners. Saturn sits in the fifth house. That's actually a good combination for this rising sign. Mars is in the sixth house, both through hard work, but some frustration. Some career recognition, though, for this sign, because of Moon being in the ninth house and ruling the 10th house. All right. And Gatika Lagna in the 11th house does indicate potentially famous friends or gains from friendships. Scorpio has Mars in the sixth house, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth house, my apologies. Saturn in the fourth, so that will create some problems with kids and with home life. And the Lord of the seventh house, although Jupiter is in the seventh house, which indicates new relationship opportunities, it will also indicate danger or arguments with existing relationship partners. But again, an intense drive to succeed. K2 being in the 11th house, again, don't trust friends. I keep saying that for Scorpio this month, for weeks. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter in the sixth house, so it's finally changed signs. It should give improved luck, but through hard work and through the willingness to learn. Saturn is in the third house, gives this sign a lot of persistence. Mars is in the fourth house, arguments at home, especially with relationship partners. And Sun, Mercury, and Venus, children will do well, though. And also past life efforts our past work efforts will be recognized. K2, not a lot of career recognition, but that's okay. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Saturn in the second house, a lot of emphasis on money, desire for land. Sun, Venus, Mercury in the fourth house gives this sign more dominance, more attention at home life. Jupiter's in the fifth, good luck for children again. Moon is in the sixth, so relationship life will be a little bit spoiled or damaged. There'll be fights. K2's in the ninth, unexpected breaks in luck, but also unexpected disappointments. You have to prepare yourself for that. So things you planned on won't work out, but things you hadn't planned on will, so that's just the perverse nature of it. And for Aquarius, let's go to Aquarius. Saturn's in the first house, makes this sign very stubborn, very fixed in its ways. And people with Aquarius suns and Aquarius moons are going to have to learn a little bit of flexibility over the next year or so. Mars and Rahu are in the second house, so there is anxiety over property, anxiety over earnings, anxiety over career and career aspirations, but within about 2 weeks, that'll be largely gone. Sun, Venus, and Mercury are in the third house. A lot of courage. Jupiter's in the fourth. Some gains from property. Moon is in the fifth. Some fulfillment of career luck. Seventh house has Gati Lagna, so you might meet somebody famous or well-known as a career partner or as a relationship partner. Finally, Pisces, Mars and Rahu are in the first house. That indicates this sign's kind of disrupted. K2's in the seventh house, maybe a little bit lonely relationship-wise. Sun, Venus, and Mars are in the second house. That's actually not a bad placement. It does indicate good earning potential. Jupiter's in the third, good for financial growth. Moon's in the fourth, a lot of focus on home life and changes to home life. And K2's in the seventh, so relationship partners can be a little bit ill or a little bit depressed. And Saturn's in the 12th, watch out for spending. All right, so let's go to the astro map and see where our issues are. So we have Sun, Jupiter, Venus hitting Hawaii. That's actually not a bad combination. But again, there are still some issues with land and fraudulent uh, acquisition of land out there. Inflation is hitting Hawaii very hard. That's, you know, I've been out there. I know, I absolutely know why it is. Uh, but, uh, but, but basically, um, and again, with Venus, there may be some severe storms. Mars isn't near there, nor is Rahu. So its potential of volcanoes is a little bit limited. There is a moon line running through uh, Oregon, Washington, Oregon, Western Canada, Alaska, Nevada, and Arizona, and a Saturn line. So this indicates still more bad weather or flooding. There'll be a lot of public attention in that part of the world. Um, Mars line is running straight through Texas, so they'll be fighting or aggravation or political reform all the way up and down from Texas, all the way up into Minnesota, and even governmental scandals roughly in this part of the country and also in Mexico. Okay. So I would keep my eyes on that part of the world for both weather problems and for government scandals. Um, Mercury is also involved in this, so there'll be land problems close to the industrial heartland, and Mercury and Venus are encompassing Cuba and essentially all the way out to Puerto Rico. So again, we're going to see some changes in government or some governmental scandals come up because of limited resources. The same will be true in Brazil, all the way down to Bolivia, all the way down to Argentina. And there's a moon line running through Argentina. So Argentina is going to be in a lot of the news over the next week. Sun, Jupiter, Venus, all passing through Brazil, excuse me. And one thing I can notice about this is there'll be more dictatorial measures taken in Brazil, more government controls. And there's a Saturn line encompassing this over here. In Ireland and the UK, there's this, I really have to see what this line is. There's a moon line running through Ireland, Spain, Portugal, up near Morocco, down near the Ivory Coast, and up through, and there's a Mars line encompassing France all the way to England. So I'm expecting to see, and all the way up to Sweden. So I'm expecting to see some violence in this general part of the world over the next week or so, maybe the next month or so, just because of where things are falling. And this I believe, is Libya. I always get Libya and Algeria confused. I apologize. Um, and even up into Norway and Sweden, which is interesting. There's also a Rahu line going up through Central Europe, through Italy, um, Austria, Finland, and a Mercury line encompassing this. So this indicates some financial panic in Central Europe and Eastern Europe. And let's see now, if we go over here, we have no lines near Israel, except for this Venus line, which does indicate they won't get right away the things they've been promised, but maybe within about 10 days they will. Okay, just given where Venus is located in the chart. And also there is some delivery of goods to Ukraine. We saw that in the news. but it still seems to me that Moscow has the edge in this particular war because of the sun line going over here and the Jupiter line going over here. This is more in their favor. The Sun-Jupiter line is going over Iran and Saudi Arabia as well. So I'm expecting these people to be not necessarily fighting, but engaged in disputes about who's right and who's wrong. The other thing I don't want to forget about is we have this Venus line running up through Western Turkey and into Syria. And this could create some flooding or some conflicts over property. But the Venus line is in Russia's territory. That gives triumph in war or victory in war. So that's one of the reasons I'm still saying I don't see a way. I don't see a path to victory for Ukraine. I could be wrong. Saturn is going through Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's kind of a difficult situation for them. Both countries are in dire straits right now. So this is not, Pakistan is an enormous country. It's got an enormous population. So it's India is a 1.5 billion people, but Pakistan is no shrimp in terms of population. So anything that affects Pakistan is going to affect the world. So the fact that they're having this line here isn't good for Pakistan, and it could create. I hope it doesn't, but it could create war tensions with India again. India has a Mars line over here, and it's going up through China and also into Russia and also through Ladakh and Bangladesh. And so there's some potential of conflict in eastern India and also panic, especially around the Bengal region. Let's see now, there's a moon line, and this will be in the news. Okay, there's a moon line running up through China and through what we used to call Southeast Asia, so Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Burma, what used to be Burma, now it's Myanmar, and essentially all the way up into Mongolia. So this stretch right here is Mongolia. But it's definitely affecting China. China is getting affected by Venus, Sun, Jupiter lines. So it looks like they're finally getting themselves organized, but it's slow. It's really not happening at the rate at which would make them happy. This line is also going through the Philippines, so it's kind of depressing the economy right down there. Indonesia had rain problems or flooding problems. Okay, so that shows up with this Venus line through the map. Borneo is probably experiencing it. Western Australia, maybe not so much. But again, Australia is tending to be a little bit controlling or a little bit restrictive, kind of censorious in its approach to its population. There's a moon line running over to New Zealand. That's not really, the moon is in Rudra, but this does bring storms or rains. And so I think you'll see a lot of violent storms in New Zealand over the next week. So that's about it. The spots I look out for would actually be pretty much everywhere. But if I were looking at the United States, I look at California and Arizona and up through Idaho, all the way through the East Coast, South America, Brazil and Argentina in particular, although Ecuador has a rather nasty line poking through it. And most of Europe, most of Africa are in for some flooding or some really bad weather patterns. And political upsets in a lot of places, replacements of governments in a lot of places. That doesn't change. So that's it for me for this week. I'm signing off right now. As always, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends or with anybody you think would be interested in this. It's greatly appreciated. We're slowly growing, but to a certain extent, that's okay. And we'll go from there. I love you all. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate your patience. If you have any ideas on things I should cover, please let me know, and I'll do them. Okay? Thanks a lot, folks. See you soon. Bye-bye, and have a great week. Again, you still have possibilities open to you all over the place, so don't forget that.